the introduction. So the topic for today is the best, most efficient training styles to live a happy and healthy life. So, you know, there's a lot of different things out there. There's cardio, there's biking, there's lifting, powerlifting, bodybuilding, there's yoga, there's just, you know, leisurely walking. Yes. So we're going to discuss between all of us what the optimal style is and how many times per week, things like that. And I'm just going to go in this clockwise fashion. So first up, we have Mr. Daniel Debrocke, who is a writer for Kabuki Strength, a very good friend of mine. Not only that, you know, he's a researcher. He has so much knowledge and he truly loves what he does. So I'm very excited to hear the things that he has to say. And then next up, we have Miss Deanna. And if you have anything that I forgot, you guys want me to add, just be like, throw it in, okay? And then we have Miss Deanna. She was nominated as a thought leader, top thought leader in 2020, right? Yes. And she's written a book about traveling abroad, and she's a hardcore yogi enthusiast, hypermobile, Miss Diana. Yeah, so she does have hypermobility, which I looked up before the session. Basically, her joints are super flexible to a point where it is not beneficial to her. And they get red hot.
Talk about that a little, yeah.
Sounds good. And then we have Mr. Doctor of Physiotherapy, Stefan Zavalin, who I met through a TEDx talk. If you haven't seen his talk, Move Less, Sit More. He's all about how to negate the bad things that happen when we sit all the time. That's how I can put it in most simplest terms for people. So yeah, and he does coaching. He helps people, especially who sit in desks all the time, just get more movement into their lives. Maybe they can't go to the gym or can't do yoga. So really good things like that. Did I miss anything for you guys?
I would just like to make an addendum. The TED Talk is move more, sit less, not move less, sit more. That would be contradictory to everything we're talking about today.
Good.
But
disclaimer.
The couple of words always get messed up. It's all good.
No, it's extremely important. I will preface this by saying I think I have like a mild form of dyslexia, so this is going to be very entertaining, so you guys keep me on my toes. When I posted this promotion on TikTok, I was like, yeah, join us at 3 p.m. PTSD. And I posted it. And somebody commented, they were like, do you mean Pacific Standard Time? I'm like, yeah.
Should have just stuck with it. Just stick to your guns. Nope.
Yeah, he said, oh, I thought I was going to see some flashbacks of your childhood or something like that. Stick around, you probably will. Anyway, so let's get into a little icebreaker game that I have for us. We got 12 people in here, and it's not going to be related to health and fitness because I just want to like get your guys' personalities out there, break the ice. So my question for you guys is, and I can start, is what is the most embarrassing or one of the most embarrassing things that's ever happened to you? Okay, so I'll go first because it is kind of gym related. This is not one of the most embarrassing things, but one of the embarrassing things. So I was in the gym. This is when I first started. I was a complete beginner, and I was dating this guy at the time, and he's kind of a jerk. But anyways, we were in the little stretching area, and I had an exercise ball. And, you know, you're new in the gym and you're kind of self-conscious, and I was doing abs and I farted and on the mat. And it was kind of loud because my butt was against the mat.
I can go next.
Yeah, okay, exactly. He laughed so loud. He just like drew attention to it more. And then he started going like this, which didn't even make it better. It just it was actually pretty funny after I got over the shock. So that's my story. All right, Ms. D, how about you?
Yeah, so we hear farts pretty often in the yoga class, and that's okay. That's really okay. So that means that everyone is relaxed. So we should look at the positive side of it. But when I think I was 12, and I got some sports pants from an older friend, from a guy, and I was playing tennis at that time, almost every day, and I had to have, you know, lots of outfits and so on. And then one day I wore those and I bent over, and then, you know, people were just looking kind of in a weird way. I didn't know.
Bend over all the time.
I didn't know exactly why, But when I got home, I realized that my pants had a hole in them. A big hole. And of course, there was a boy that I liked there, and he said he saw that too. It was horrible. So now, 20 years after, I still remember it, and I probably will never forget it until I die.
Or you probably check your pants for a hole every
yeah,
time
yes,
now.
yeah.
Good practice for anyone to implement into their lives, probably. All right. Who wants to go next? Daniel or Stefan?
Sure. I actually had a similar experience. So I used to model when I was like younger and like leaner and beautiful and and so I was actually like I was meeting one of the agents or for some sort of meeting. I can't even remember. And I was still pretty jacked back then, even though I was quite a bit smaller. And I was wearing these dress pants that I hadn't worn in a while. And anyways, meet the guy, shake his hand, and I sit down. And my pants just exploded, like completely ripped. And I was young, like I was like maybe 21 or something like that. Or yeah, I was like maybe 21. I was so embarrassed, I didn't know what to say. So I just didn't say anything. And I was hoping he wouldn't notice. And then he's like, okay, cool. We're just going to get your measurements because, so we can fit the clothing properly. So I'm like, all right, cool. So I stand up, start taking my measurements. Then he asked me to turn around and I was like, oh, fuck, I turn around. And then yeah. So from like my hip all the way down to my knee, just completely ripped. And he was just like, the worst part about it was he didn't say anything. If he was like, yo, what happened? At least it would have been a bit like we would have been able to joke about it, but he didn't say anything. And I was like, fuck. That was brutal.
But both of you didn't say anything. I would have been like, oh, you got me really excited there, sir.
I don't know. I had never had that happen, and I'm like really introverted, so that was terrible. But
Holy shit. Did you get the gig or not?
I did. I ended up turning it down though, I think, because I got a better deal. Like this is super random. Like I know I don't seem like it at all, but that was for Calvin Klein, and then I got a better deal from Abercrombie, and so I went with them for a little bit. Yeah.
All right. Well, wasn't meant.
And now I look nothing. Now I'm not a model. I'm just big and fat, and that's about it.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Stefan. What about you?
I'm just gonna stay in line with the ripping and booty related issues of embarrassment. I was squatting in the gym, and I don't remember how much it was. I'm not gonna embarrass myself with a number of what was on the bar, but I went all the way down, and something ripped. Clothing, not a muscle, but something ripped. And there was that moment of where you go, I don't know if it was the boxers or if it was the shorts. So either everybody knows or I'm the only one right now that knows. Yeah. And I have no idea. I'm in the middle of a squat. I'm in the hole. I'm at the bottom. How could I possibly know at this very moment? And so it was just like that moment of, okay, I'm just going to treat it as if everybody knows, because that was the worst fear. And luckily it was just the boxers that ripped. And I wish that only happened once, but it was a total of 3 times that had happened to me throughout the course of my undergrad career in the squatting. I don't know if it was, I don't think I was wearing Calvin Klein, so maybe, or Abercrombie brands, so maybe that was the issue.
I was just going to say,
something. Yeah.
What brand were you wearing? And let's never wear that again.
Maybe I just need to get a size up. Maybe that was my issue. I don't know.
Maybe. Can't contain the booty. And you can't check that discreetly, like after,
no.
You can't be like, whoa, just stretch, just looking, nothing to see here. Yeah, embarrassing. All right, love it. Okay, guys, so great warm-up. As I mentioned in the chat, if you guys have questions, type it in and we'll answer it after. So let's get into it. Okay. Longevity to live, what is the best training styles to live a long and happy life? So we have so many different types: strength training, yoga training, cardio. So Daniel, why don't you go first? We'll go clockwise and then we'll go counterclockwise. 2 minutes, go for it.
So probably the most important consideration when looking at designing any type of intervention is always going to be adherence. So, I could list off like these are going to be the benefits that are probably more prominent in strength training versus cardiovascular training versus whatever. But so long as you sustain that behavior, that's going to be the most important thing. So I'd say that's the first most important thing, hands down. Even if you're walking, that's better than doing nothing, right? So sustainability is the most important factor. After that, again, it still depends on the context. So for instance, resistance training and hypertrophy, as well as strength training, is going to be exponentially more important in the elderly than it will be for different demographics. So I think, again, the context matters, your goals, your age, if you have any sort of injury history or, particular conditions. Those are also going to be really important, likely should be factored in. Also personal enjoyment. Again, that kind of is partly on the adherence side as well, but I think it's worth mentioning. If you don't enjoy something, you're probably not going to stick to it for very long. So it's probably worth mentioning. So I think that more than the specific modality you choose, I think whether or not you enjoy it and whether you can stick to it for several years and make it part of your lifestyle is probably the most important thing.
Definitely. Cool. All right, Miss Deanna, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so I like to say I loved the answer, by the way, and you've covered a lot. I think a combination, between cardio strength and stretching would be ideal. However, we were mentioning that some people are hypermobile and maybe overweight as well. So, and maybe they have lots of stress in their life. So doing too much cardio puts too much stress on the body and on the joints. So it would be better for that person to better work on strengthening the body. There's this trade-off between flexibility and stability. So you want to strengthen the body to be able to stabilize the joints before you actually go into cardio. So, just building up to what was said, what Daniel said. So I think it's important to know yourself so good, or to go to a person who can actually analyze you as a whole. Right? Not to just to a person who tells you should do this type of workout and that's it. So to look at your life as a whole, to see how many stress factors you have in your life. What is your level of stress? How much time you have? Do you have kids? Do you have a flexible schedule? What are your needs? What are your risks in your body? So injuries, as Daniel said, and so on. So I think it's just so different from one person to the other that I think giving a prescription, okay, this is how what the amount is for each, is very risky, and basically doesn't take each person and their own needs and desires and preferences and abilities into consideration. However, I would make sure to have a well-rounded, movement schedule if possible, if that allows. But for example, my mom, who hates moving, hates walking, has her feet ache a lot because she has bone issues and so on. I cannot tell her to go to play tennis or something like that, right? So for her, going to aqua gym that doesn't put pressure on her joints is the good way to, or maybe the only way that she found this possibility to move. So especially for us dealing with people and coaching people and so on, it's so important to understand them at not only at a shallower level, right? And to give them the same prescription to, or suggestions to everyone. We need to understand them better and to honor where they're at, their strength, to honor their limitations, and to to celebrate wherever they are. And just the fact that they are listening to this is already a step forward, right? Because it means that you want to find out more about how to best move. Or even if someone shows up at the gym, that's already a step, a huge step for some people, especially people who have body issues, and have self-image issues. People who are not comfortable in going to the gym and sweating in front of other people, and who maybe had traumatic experiences with regards to this. So I think yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stefan, go ahead.
You'll have time to get back to it. Loved it. But basically, listen to the person. Everyone's so unique, right? All right, Doctor, you're next.
Yes, I will also. I will be giving somewhat prescriptive things. So I'm going to put on my prescriptive hat and be the only one that's out of Los Angeles as well.
Oh shit! I left my hat.
I know. So for me, this is something that I've thought about. I've discussed. a lot, because I think that there is a hierarchy that at least I, from physical therapy, from gymnastics, weightlifting, swimming, all sorts of sports and interactions, have basically discovered. For me, it basically goes down to four things. The top one is movement, then it goes to mobility, then it goes to cardiovascular, then it goes to strength training. So movement is the number one thing that needs to happen. If somebody's sitting on the couch, they probably don't need a crazy exercise plan or anything like that. It's what they're going to be able to handle, which has kind of been said of what you're going to be consistent with and sustainable as far as doing. But it's going to be movement. And as far as you have to have movement throughout the day and not just a little bit of movement here and there, and that's it. That's all you do. If you do have constant movement throughout the day, you can then move to mobility. There is a difference. There's a trade-off of stability and flexibility. And the difference between mobility and flexibility is how flexible you are is how far the joint can go, or just passively. Mobility is, can you actually get into that position? If you have a skew, if you're not strong enough, or if you're too strong and not flexible enough, you're overusing muscles that aren't supposed to be there. So that causes an issue. So then you have that mobility piece. And sure, you can do exercises for mobility or just have a variety of movement. We're coming back to that movement piece at the top. Then you go to cardiovascular health. So at least in the States, cardiovascular disease, number one killer, even during the pandemic. So in terms of cardiovascular health, it's crucial. It's important. We have to make sure that we're keeping our bodies healthy. That doesn't mean running for everybody. There's a lot that can go into the cardiovascular side of things, but it does come back to the movement. Technically, if I was to give a prescription, usually it's 150 minutes of moderate activity throughout the week. It's not a whole lot, but that's the bare minimum. We can discuss prescriptions more and more. And then finally, you have the strength training. Now, if you were to go biggest bang for your buck, or what do you need in terms of getting the biggest muscles or the biggest output for caloric in long-term wise, strength training is great. But in terms of longevity, if you don't have all those other pieces, you don't need to be worrying about just pure strength training. And twice a week for each muscle group seems to be the best. So if we put all of it together, that's how it ends up working. But still, movement is the top one. So if you're going to the gym, but the rest of the day you're just sitting on the couch, that's not really healthy for longevity.
Yep. I 100% agree. And I'm just going to throw myself on the burner and say, ideally, what I know is the best and optimal way to train for longevity is, two times a week of cardio, moving at least like an hour a day, getting 10,000 steps in, and then strength training for 3-4 times per week. What I actually do is 5 days a week of strength training and no cardio, and trying to be flexible. So, and I think that's common for a lot of people. Like either they love the cardio, they love the biking, they love the running, but then they lack on the strength training, which is so essential, which will help them in their runs and everything else. So what I want to dig into is like, how would you get, we all agree that balance, cardiovascular exercise is important, strength training and flexibility, mobility. But how would you get somebody who is more of into the lifting side of things to do more cardio, and vice versa? How would you get someone who loves their cardio to do more of the strength training if we know that is the optimal way? Take it away, Mr. Daniel.
I mean, I don't know that we could even say that is the optimal way. Like if we're just looking at longevity in terms of years lived, that's very different than the quality of years lived. And those are two distinct metrics, and they sound similar, but they're not. And so, for instance, like you might extend your life by 5 years, but if you're living in like some sort of retirement home, it's miserable. Like, I mean, even during the pandemic, like how many of the elderly population died in absolutely horrific conditions due to the regulations, right? So longevity has to be taken into context, or has to be contextualized with the individual's life, with their goals and what their values are. So for instance, like someone like myself, maybe I'm a bad example because I actually do get a very, very high step count every day. And like, I'm really meticulous about training and health and stuff like that. But for other individuals who just want to get really jacked, maybe it's not a good trade-off for them, So just for their time, for their enjoyment, like if you're hating going for walks every day, maybe find something else to do, So I think for me anyways, if I am talking to an athlete Generally, I'm working with higher level athletes, so it's not really something I have to do. But if I was working with, let's say, Gen Pop, and I was trying to, get them to do something they would actually adhere to, again, adherence has to be the most important thing that we're looking at when prescribing any sort of intervention. I would ask them what they enjoy doing, because gyms are a relatively new phenomena, but people were playing frisbee, football, soccer, all this stuff for I don't know how many years prior to even the conception of gyms. So if you enjoy playing frisbee, if you enjoy going for bike rides or swimming or whatever you're doing, make it recreational and sort of gamify it. I think that's a really, really undervalued way of getting people into some better habits, at least initially. And once they gain momentum, then we can maybe start looking at adding things. So I'm a really big fan of BJ Fogg's behavior change model and how it's iterative, and you start with something relatively small, relatively accessible, low motivational requirement, low ability requirement, and then slowly scale from there over time as the individual's competency and self-efficacy increases.
Love it. Love it. Deanna, do you have a method that could help people implement more of what, they probably should have into their lives, whether it's strength training or flexibility?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in coaching, we try to connect an activity to a goal, right? To what do you want to achieve? Okay, I want to lose weight. Why do you want to lose weight? Well, because I want to have more energy to play with my kids. Well, there you have it, right? This can be a powerful motivator. I want to achieve this health goal or fitness goal. Why? Well, because I want to be more attractive to a potential partner, right? So connecting the health goals to something more personal, to something that is really, really very close to a person's heart could be a way to do it. I think people then, there's pleasure and pain, right? So you move towards pleasure and you move away from pain. By not moving, by not doing, a certain type of by not living healthy, right? So what are the risks there? And again, this might convince people to exercise more and so on. So it's about a little bit about highlighting the benefits, what's in it for them, and to connect a certain movement goal to something that is important to that person. However, I do believe that motivation also needs to be intrinsic. So I used to, put a lot of pressure on myself to convince people to do something, but it's actually not your goal as a coach. Is a person is the goal of the person, right? So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. And so again, bottom line, connecting it to a higher purpose, to something that's very close to a person's heart. And then regarding sustainability, I think it's very important. So I'm not going to repeat what Daniel said because that was awesome, and I agree to everything, about quality of life and so on. But I think it's very important to be able to train sustainably and safely. I think that's very, very important, because if you overdo it, you risk injuring yourself, and you want to move and to train in such a way that you can train today and tomorrow and next week, in a few months, and in 10 years from now. Because if you overdo it now, then you won't be able to do it in a certain period of time, and then you're gonna kind of lose the benefit. So I think if you think about long term, you also need to think about training safely and smartly, and maybe asking people who maybe have a little bit more training or do your own research. And if I may, what I think is very important, and what we try to do in our in yoga, is to help people know their body so well to be able to say when the pain that they're feeling is healthy and sustainable, and when it's unsafe and dangerous. So if you feel it in the joint, what does that mean? If you feel it in the body of the muscle, what does that mean? How do you separate, that feeling? So we want to help people connect to their bodies in such a way that they will make the difference between, okay, this is good, the good pain, good amount of stress for my body. This is not healthy. This is not healthy pain.
Super important for people to know, and you don't know unless you start or try it. Right? It's a very, very crucial first step. So
Because ultimately we are not in their bodies. I cannot tell you how you should feel a stretch. I cannot tell you where you should feel something because your body is very different. But I can describe the feeling. I can describe the sensation. Well, you might know, or where you could feel it and where you shouldn't feel it because it's not healthy.
That's what I love about yoga. You got, at the end of the day, you still got to do the work, right? You got to take that time to learn about your body. So, okay, Doctor, you're next.
I am next week. So realistically, I agree with the goal setting. Absolutely. That it has to be something that is important for them. And that's going to be different for different people. And we as coaches can never push that on them. It's whatever they want. The way that we get to it, it's not so compartmentalized. I think that sometimes we go, oh, you want to train cardio? Do this. Oh, you want to do strength training? Do this. There are plenty of methods where we can train all of it together. Truthfully, the four things that I said of movement, mobility, cardio, and strength training, you could do in one exercise if it's a continuous thing for a while. I mean, yoga is a beautiful example of something like that. If you're going to be doing a session for 45 minutes or an hour, there's so much mobility. You're definitely holding things that are going to be a struggle for you to hold, and your heart's going to be pumping. So there's a lot to be compromised there. But when it comes to asking a person about their goal, sometimes we can maybe even trick them a little bit, because you were asking, how do we pull somebody? We know it's good for them, but how do we get them to be on board with it? So if somebody says, no, I just want to be, super strong, and that's all that I ever really want to do, right? But then you go, okay, but what about when your heart is just like pumping like crazy and you're not able to handle being under a squat of 500, 600, 700 pounds? Like maybe you need to take some walks and you need to get your cardio going, or maybe you need to do some flexibility training because your mobility is for shit, right? Whatever it might be. If somebody says, I just want to look good, I want to look good, so then, I can find the right partner and so that we can hook up. Okay. And then when you hook up, are you going to be out of breath after like 2 minutes? So maybe you should do some cardio training. That might be somewhat important for you, for whatever it might be. So I think we can absolutely find those ways, but it doesn't have to be to those extremes. We can find ways to incorporate it into the everyday parts of it, and we don't have to compartmentalize. I hate that word. Saying it, not the actual word. Into the different categories. I think movement lives amongst all of them, and especially for longevity, we have to find a way to utilize all of it.
Totally. And what the downside, let's say, of the gym is, there is a big problem of that, of people hurting themselves because of ego lifting and not thinking about the long-term impacts that can happen to their body if they, potentially hurt themselves. So, for new people going to the gym, I wish there was more importance put on mobility and cardiovascular training, just so that they set themselves up on the right foot. So we haven't had any questions, so I'm going to keep going for another 10 minutes around this topic. The next thing I would love to talk about is personality. So, and this is something that came up from Deanna. She said that a person's personality comes into play when determining what kind of training style they lean towards to. And, I find more masculine people, men and women, tend towards resistance training, strength training, and then the flexibility, passive side of things is definitely the yoga, mobility, things like that, and we all need balance in our lives. The strength trainers definitely should have more flexibility in their lives. And vice versa. Some of these yogis, like if they did more strength training, man, they would be in great physical shape. So yeah, how much do you think personality comes into play? And yeah, what are your thoughts? Let's go with Stefan this time.
Oh, okay. Well, it's been about 15 minutes since my last costume change. So we're gonna keep going as I answer it throughout. So realistically, of course, personality is important, right? Thinking through it, if you think about triathletes and ultra marathoners, I mean, a lot of them have the same idea of, oh, they had some kind of addictions or any kind of those behaviors. So we find exercise as a way to kind of deal, and even therapy. How many people say that the gym is my therapy, lifting weights is my therapy? So surely there's a personality type to it, right? But unfortunately, it also might become for some people their identity, which that I think is where it becomes sometimes an issue, where they're not willing to be as open-minded. I know we've talked about before
CrossFit.
CrossFitters. Yeah, CrossFitters. And CrossFitters get a bad rep for that because they're just like, oh, I hate, you should never do bicep curls as a CrossFitter. That's not functional movement. What in the world do you do there? And it's like, okay, but what about isolating muscles for proper rehab? Or just pure vanity because you just want to look good, whatever it might be, right? So I think there is definitely that part about personality. And there are so many different ways to move and exercise that any personality type can be fit. But I think the biggest part that I would say is don't be afraid to venture out of it, because if anything, even CrossFit, and I'm a CrossFitter, but even CrossFit, all sports and disciplines are rather welcoming. They don't really try to push you away. It may seem that way from the outside, but most of them are truly welcoming to all personality types.
Love that. Love that. Miss D, what do you got to say?
One of my best friends, she's very, very fiery, and she does Ashtanga yoga. She cannot stand the other styles of yoga. It has to be something very fiery, the power yoga, the Ashtanga, and so on. I'm very airy, and I like, the slower type of movement with a soft voice and so on. So I think you are kind of attracted to a certain type of movement, or to a certain type of exercise, depending on how you are. I had one other friend who, well, she had to deal with a lot of trauma, and when she moved to Vancouver, she did kickboxing, and now she has a type of something of fighting, and she has the highest certification, whether it's a belt, I don't know. And I was saying, well, I didn't know that you're doing that as well. And she said, yes, because therapy was too expensive. So she released a lot of that stress and of that trauma by hitting stuff. And I love that, so I think everyone should find their best way to train on the thing that they like the most. For example, if you ask Mr. Husband to run, he might not want to, but if you ask him to run after a ball, he will probably do it. So I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think you are attracted towards a certain type of activity. So the question is, you should ask yourself, why am I doing this? What part of me calls me towards this? So that will be the first question. And then the second question is, what other aspect of my personality do I want to nurture or to bring to life? And what type of movement might actually, or activity, or sports might awaken that part in me? So do I want to be more feminine? Maybe I want to go to belly dancing. Who knows? Do I want to be more masculine? Then maybe I need to do, lifting, as you said, Nikita. So I think it's a matter of choice. And in yoga we say, and I'm here to represent the voice of yoga, that everyone has their inner teacher, and the inner teacher knows exactly what they need, when they need, and how much they need of that thing. So just listen to yourself and try to be honest to yourself. Ask yourself why you're doing what you're doing. What would you like to develop? Which part of you would you like to nurture more? And maybe move towards that type of movement as well. So be open, just as Stefan said. So many wise people in this.
Yes. It's really amazing because it's really bridging that gap between the mind, body, and spirit, which is really cool. Yes, Mr. Daniel, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly common knowledge that people are going to self-select into, activities that they tend to enjoy, right? Like, it's not a surprise that all of the dudes who are like 7 foot tall are basketball players. Like, that's, you know what I mean? So I think that that's a pretty common thing. I do think that I do push back against the idea that people are good at judging what they need, though. I would actually suggest that the vast majority of people aren't. When we look at the literature, even on like exercise, obesity, things like that, I think it's fairly clear. And so when I look at the research, and then just also based on like my own experience working with athletes, I think a big component for longevity when it comes to sustaining any type of exercise is education. Education has to be a central component. not just like, hey, here's a pamphlet, but like an ongoing communication process between either clinician and client, or clinician and patient, sorry, or coach and client, or whoever is there. I think that's a really, really central piece, because if you, I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? For instance, sensation. I think someone mentioned sensation at one point. I don't know exactly who it is, but sensation is actually not really a reliable indicator, especially for a beginner, right? So if we look at the literature on like individuals accurately evaluating their proximity to failure on, let's say, a squat or something like that, it's actually not very reliable. If we start doing an RDL, for instance, or like a stiff leg deadlift, and you really arch your low back, right, you're going to get significantly more sensation in your hamstrings, but that doesn't mean you're getting a greater stimulus. You're actually probably getting a less stimulus due to your limited ability to actually load your structure because of an insufficient mechanical position, right? Whereas adopting a more neutral position allows you to increase load, which gives more direct stimulus to that. So I think, like, I do agree that people need to become self-sufficient, but how that comes about is usually through education and then experience, and sort of like volitional exposure, like a graded exposure type, you know, almost like a cognitive behavioral therapy, right? But for exercise. So, you know, hey, you don't feel comfortable doing this? Okay, well, let's try with this. And sometimes, yeah, you're just going to have to push people outside their comfort zone, because reality, like most of us, there's parts of us that kind of suck. There's parts of us that we don't want to admit are just not as good as it could be. And we keep ignoring it. And then sometimes we hide behind, you know, self-compassion or self-care and all this stuff. And in reality, we just need to develop a little bit more resiliency, a little bit more grit. And part of that is through education. Part of that is through, you know, let's say compassionate guidance, or compassionate, like, quote unquote, encouragement. And so I think those elements are really, really important in the sustained efforts of the individual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, Miss D.
I just wanted to comment to something what Daniel said. So when I said about sensation, that's exactly what I said. I think it's important for people to make a difference between the sensation that, so the right amount of stress in their body, and the sensations, or those feelings in their body that they're actually dangerous. And I think, as you said, this has to do with education and with experience, and with a teacher telling you, or a coach telling you how where you should, or you could feel it. And for example, if you feel it in the body of the muscle, then that's something that you maybe, the type of pain that you could look for. But if you feel it in the joint, that it is something you should avoid. So I'm not saying about people becoming sensation junkies, but I'm exactly saying to be able to differentiate between those sensations that are sustainable, that are healthy, that do, you know, the right amount of stress, and the sensations that are dangerous. So absolutely, education for sure. And I would, it's important for sure. And I hope that we are able to, you know, provide that as to some degree. And when it comes to obesity, you were saying that people don't know what's good for them. Here, I will disagree, because I don't think that anyone who has health issues doesn't know at a deeper level that this is not healthy for them. Eating junk food, or not moving, and so on. So people actually know. You were saying about ignoring that thing. Yes, but ignoring, it means that you know, but you decide not to listen. So when I said about, you know, inner teacher, I was also saying about being authentic and being true to yourself, listening to that part of yourself that is, you know, truthful, that is that knows, that is wise. So hiding behind self-compassion is not being truthful, and is not listening to your inner teacher. So I don't think anyone thinks that it's very healthy not to move, and it's very healthy to, I don't know, to have, you know, to eat junk food, for example. So I do believe that people do know, even subconsciously, when things are not good for them. And that's, you know, that part of intuition and so on. And I know that this sounds a little bit abstract, but I truly believe in the power of each person to know what is good for them, and to be able to choose, if they choose to listen. But again, I think this is I think we can simply agree to disagree here on this.
I think something that may bridge the gap between that is what with Daniel, you said, you know, of course, a person who's super tall, like you should play basketball for sure. But I think it's more about knowing yourself and doing the inner work to be like, yes, okay, I've maybe been strength training for 10 years and I love it. Obviously, you would love it. But then why am I not going into the flexibility more? Why am I not going into my cardio respiratory training more? And to take a look at yourself, because, you know, sooner or later, you're going to need to. Sooner or later, your body's going to tell you, F you, I need more flexibility training, and you're going to have no choice. So what's been really cool is, like, for me personally, to get to know myself and then have more of this passive approach where I am accepting myself, accepting my limitations, as opposed to pushing myself, you know, really being hard on myself, and which is great, builds character and strength in certain ways. But then what's so beautiful about the yoga and mobility training is self-acceptance, like, you know, accepting where you are. So that correlation between, okay, in a certain part of my life, this got me through. And if it's different for a person who does yoga a lot, like for this part of my life, this yoga got me through, and I needed that self-compassion, that passive stretching, things like that. But it's not working for me, and I need to do something different. Like, I need to incorporate more resilience, more strength training into my life to get that optimal balance. And what's really cool is I think everyone is on their own personal journey to get there, and we all get there at different times, but it really is such a internal journey, and you have to, like, know yourself. But that's where like meditation comes in so great, is to start having that self-awareness and being like, no ego about it, but like Daniel said, like, where am I shitty at and where am I good at, and what do I need to focus on more? Because yeah, balance is key. So does anyone have anything to add? We're pretty much at our time. That flew by. Next time we should maybe do an hour. Stefan, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on it. I think it's so difficult for some of these topics. For example, obesity, and why do people choose or not choose, and are they good at figuring it out or not? It's so hard when we're looking at it in kind of that linear thing of, is it good for them to eat junk food or not? Right? Because we're saying, well, from a health perspective, it's not good for them to eat junk food. Yet at the same time, from a mental health perspective, that might be the one way that they're getting dopamine, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm happy. Unfortunately, here in the States, the education sucks, and people think that there are certain, just because it says it's healthy and it's packaged, it's good for them. Like a Fig Newton is good for you because, you know, it's got fig in it, but no, it's effectively a cookie from that regard. So there is that part of where, when we look at it on one side, maybe we have the intuition, but so much of it gets so complicated and convoluted. And I'm hoping that as we keep going with these panel discussions, that we're going to be able to peel apart some of those layers, because I mean, it can really get deep.
So true. So true. There was something Mr. Ryan said that I would like us to address. And if anyone else has a question and answer, are you guys okay to keep going for another like 5-10 minutes?
Yep.
Yeah. So Mr. Ryan Spencer said, but I'm not really good at overcoming my laziness. So, you know, this is something that could be a whole nother topic of discussion. Oh, here comes the question. How do you overcome problems with lethargy in weeks following a consistent routine? This coming from someone who is figuring his way through bipolar. I'm curious if the two are related. All right. Does anyone have something they would like to say right off the bat?
Yeah, I would. So mental health is a completely different ballgame. So that absolutely can affect your actual physical perception of energy, of difficulty, things like that. So there's good evidence to show that individuals who are depressed experience a higher level of subjective perceived exertion during exercise. So you kind of have this weird relationship between depression and, like, I want to be really clear, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a clinician. This is something that I do know about, but I do think it's going to be best to actually see a qualified clinician, like a psychologist, a psychiatrist, if you actually are dealing with something like this.
We
but I'm just going to give my but I'm just going to give my kind of perspective. So with something like depression, with something like bipolar, there's a bit of a negative feedback loop where exercise is one of the most significant things that you can do for your mental health, right? It is probably, what is it? I think it's the most impactful non-pharmacological intervention that you can do for mental health, for most things anyways. But at the same time, if you are experiencing depression, anxiety, mood disorders, things like that, that simultaneously acts as a massive barrier to adherence. So we have this really, sort of catch-22 where this thing is the solution, or at least is part of the solution. And then at the same time, it's a massive barrier, right? So I think seeking out professional help, potentially getting medication if that's appropriate, is going to be, or can be, a huge game changer for many people. But first and foremost, see a qualified clinician, talk to talk to a specialist, and get their input, because this is something that's definitely not something that should be addressed on an individual level on an Instagram live. So that's I guess what I'll say as far as that goes.
Okay, nice. Does anyone have anything they want to add on that? Basically said, how do you stay consistent after you've, been consistent, but then your depression just sweeps the rug from underneath your feet?
I definitely, so in terms of bipolar specifically, and depression can have these ebbs and flows absolutely as well, is one of the questions is finding what is your sort of that cycle of bipolar, if you're able to track it. Because that might be correlating with it. It might not. Daniel's absolutely right in the terms of seeking professional help, yes, but you can kind of get more and more information on that. The other part, and I think that was the question also before, that wasn't the bipolar, is, okay, what if I'm just lazy, right? That's the piece where we have to go, what is the most sustainable thing for you? If it's literally doing 30 seconds of exercise every single day, great, do that. Because doing 30 seconds is still better than doing zero. A lot of people jump to that. I have to get in the gym for an hour. That's the only thing that counts as exercise. That's it. And again, we talked about the variety of exercises nowadays and the variety of movement. So for me, I would immediately say, let's go with movement first. Let's not even think about the exercise piece. But when it comes to laziness, what is the smallest thing that you can do that's so simple you don't even have to think about it? If it's literally walking to your front door, just start there. And then you build up the habit.
Very nice, very nice. Deanna, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I'm not very comfortable in saying anything because I'm not very familiar with with bipolar and with this, but I don't know anyone who didn't benefit from the endorphins of movement. And I know people who have done all kinds of sports activities since they were young, and they say that it helped them in every other area of their life. And I think it gives you the movement in general gives you such a good vibe in general that will spill in everything else in your life in general. So, and then coming back to the habit building, there's books, The Power of Habit, Atomic Habits. So both of these books I recommend if you really want to set up some important habits. But start small, as Daniel and Stefan said. Start small. Start with the low-hanging fruit, the things that are easiest. Try to connect a certain habit to something that you already do, right? Something that's already part of your routine, and try to connect the two. And make it as easy as possible. So put your trainers next to the door, put your clothes and get them ready the day before. Tell everyone that you're going to do 30 minutes of practice. Maybe do a challenge with your friends to move 30 minutes every day. So there's lots of things you can do, and all of those things are in the books that I've mentioned, The Power of Habit and Atomic Habits as well.
He sounds very grateful. You're welcome, Mr. Spencer. And to that, I would have, thank you, Deanna. Very, very good points. Again, it goes back to education, learning about yourself. And what I would say to that is, this is where self-compassion really comes into play, because I know we talk a lot, in this fitness, consistency, discipline, which is super important. Absolutely. However, when you're in this position, really dealing with self-compassion and telling yourself, okay, I'm in a dip right now, acknowledging that you're in a dip, having that compassion for yourself and saying, what really is possible for me to complete at this point, given where I'm at? And if that's honestly just doing some stretches or drinking enough water or something so small that's still going to be a win in your bucket, that will still keep you in the game and not start this negative feedback loop of like guilt and shame. So just the smallest win, whatever that can be to keep yourself in the game, I think is so huge. So you don't feel like you've stopped and you have to start again from ground zero. So yeah, okay. Well, that's about all the time we have. Does anyone have anything else they want to say before we wrap up?
I guess I would say one more comment in terms, like, I definitely agree with the small behaviors. I agree with the ongoing education. I agree with all of that stuff. One additional note that I would say would just be, like, you don't need motivation, or like lethargy has zero impact on your decision to pick up your kids from school. It has zero impact on your decision on whether or not you're going to show up to work or not. And I think that people give their emotions way too much validity. Emotions are transient in nature, and they are not good in terms of guiding people for long-term success, right? Their transient nature is supposed to basically let you know, like, hey, something's going on right now in this moment. And so although they're valuable, I'm not saying dismiss them, ignore them, suppress them. What I am saying, though, is that be aware of them. Like, if you were to think of it as a tool, you don't use a hammer for everything. And emotions need to be guided in a certain way. And then in other times, you definitely do need to sort of just ignore it and say, hey, you know what, I need to move forward. And exercise is one of those things where people ask about, you know, oh, what do I do with loss of motivation? It doesn't matter. It just doesn't. You know, like, as an adult, we make decisions all the time that we're not motivated to do. You brush your teeth. I don't like brushing my teeth. You know, it's annoying. I don't like eating. I have to eat all the time. It's annoying. But at the end of the day, you just do it. And so I think from like a habituation standpoint, starting really small, like everyone else here was suggesting, is a fantastic tool. I think the compassion thing is a fantastic idea as well. However, I also think there's a risk of people just being a little too lenient on themselves. So you need to make sure you're balancing that and being genuinely honest. One of the things Deanna was saying earlier was talking about like being honest with yourself. And a lot of the times people maybe aren't, and they're maybe a little too lenient on themselves, and they call it self-care when in reality it's not. So you need to be very critical when you're drawing that line and making those distinctions and saying, hey, would I skip work today even if I was tired? No? Okay, well then I should probably go to the gym, or I should probably go for my walk, or I should probably whatever it is that you need to do, right? So that would be my final thought, I guess.
I freaking love that you said that, because that is so, so important. Like, yes, you should be compassionate, but it needs to be priority number 2, or like, you know, your job is number 1, but honestly, it has to be that priority. And you can't just be like, well, I don't feel like it. You're not always going to feel like it. So, well, no, like I've had those days where I'm like, I don't fucking want to go to the gym right now. I don't, yeah. But you still, you know, you do. And then you do that enough times and you build that habit. So yeah. Awesome, you guys. Well, thank you so much for your time. And if you guys enjoyed this live, I'm going to be editing it, putting it up on YouTube, and you guys can watch it from there. Also, next week, hopefully in around a 2-week time, if we all still like each other, we're going to come back and discuss nutrition interventions for weight loss. So join us again, and we'll do more promo around that. And yeah, thank you again for joining, you guys. And next time we'll have another little fun icebreaker, which I'll keep a surprise. And yeah, if you guys don't have each other on social, add each other now. And so yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.